Today we're testing the Folium emulator for iOS, the first 3DS emulator available on the App Store. It's a $5 purchase, and I'm going to walk you through some performance tests for several games, including Mario Kart, New Super Mario Bros. 2, Pokemon Moon, Omega Ruby, Super Mario 3D Land, Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, and Pokemon Y, all in an attempt to answer, is it worth the $5 at this time? At this time being critical, as new updates will change the value proposition over time. Note, you'll need an actual 3DS with purchase games in order to get this working, and I'll be using a PS5 controller for input, but you can use any compatible Bluetooth controller or the touchscreen controls, which I don't find comfortable. I won't be going over system files or game files in this video. I'm not even sure I'll make a video on setup, so seek other creators for that knowledge. There are no in-app settings at this time for Folium, so this test will be seeing what the out-of-the-box user experience is. And I'll be running all the tests on an iPhone 15 Pro Max, the fastest iPhone on the market to date. If you have anything less than a 15 Pro Max, your performance will suffer. I'll make another video on performance after some tweaking, which requires editing a config.ini file manually at a later date. Let's get started with our performance tests. Mario Kart 7 launches and both touchscreen and Bluetooth controls work fine out of the box. I noticed immediately that the audio started stuttering in the menus, a sign of the overall performance for this game. In-race performance is technically playable, but the frame rate and audio issues hinder my enjoyment enough that I won't be picking this title back up again until performance improves. It feels like it's running at about 60% of target frame rate. I'd rate the playability of Mario Kart as a 5 out of 10 and the audio as a 5 out of 10 as well for this one. Overall, I don't recommend this title at this time. Next up is New Super Mario Bros. 2. Right away, this game feels much snappier in the menus than Mario Kart 7 did. Also, I did a quick test of the horizontal orientation, which I find to be very unsatisfying at this time, as the view is stretched and squished, so I kept everything in portrait mode for my tests. My understanding is this layout will become more flexible in future updates. This game was highly playable and pretty enjoyable for the testing. There were occasional audio and frame hitches, but overall things were smooth. I replayed the first level twice to try and isolate compilation stutters from performance stutters, and unfortunately, I still had mild performance hitches on the second playthrough. Overall, I'd rate the playability of this title as an 8 out of 10 and the audio as an 8 out of 10 as well. I recommend this title out of the box. Moving on to Pokemon Moon. This title was a mixed bag. Interior spaces and battles perform okay, but the cities and routes are extremely sluggish. Also, some of the cutscenes are smooth while others are sluggish. The audio is such a big part of the Pokemon series, and it really suffers in this title, even in the places where the frame rate is at target. The good news is, if you mute the game and you're patient, it's playable. I'd rate playability as a 7 out of 10 if you don't mind slowdowns in the larger areas. However, I'm going to put audio as a 5 out of 10. Basically, you should play the game muted or your patience will be tested. One final note before moving on, the intro for Pokemon Moon is way too long. It took me 20 minutes to speedrun all the dialogue and cutscenes before my first battle, which only takes about 7 minutes on the other two that I tested. Next up, in contrast to Pokemon Moon, Omega Ruby runs quite a bit better. This is great news because it's my favorite Pokemon game for the 3DS. Right out of the box, both playability and audio are much better. The open areas still suffer a little bit, but not nearly as badly as Pokemon Moon, running at 100% target frame rate most of the time, with only a few audio or frame rate hitches here and there. Transitions are sluggish, which could be shader compilation, but battles were nearly perfect, which is where it really counts. I'd rate the playability and the audio as an 8 out of 10 for Omega Ruby. And my final verdict is I recommend this one alongside New Super Mario Bros. 2 to showcase the Folium app's success right out of the box. At this point, I'd like to show you how Super Mario 3D Land runs, but it wouldn't launch. It crashed immediately, so I can't recommend it as it's 100% unplayable. You've been warned. Your mileage may vary, but without any adjustments, this game is a big nope. Moving on to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. This game was another case of a mixed bag. Running at nearly target frame rate, the visuals looked pretty good out of the box, but audio was taking a hit nearly 100% of the time, as it struggled to keep up in all cases except for interior scenes. Ocarina of Time is another case where the audio plays such a huge part of the storytelling, so if it's your first time trying this game, I recommend skipping it. But if you're familiar and don't mind muting, this game is playable out of the box. I'll give the playability a 7 out of 10 due to the inconsistencies of the frame rate, and the audio a 5 out of 10 for being terrible most of the time. Overall, I recommend seeking this title on an N64 emulator for now instead of trying to suffer through this iteration. Last and probably least of the Pokemon titles is Pokemon Y. The performance matches very closely to Pokemon Moon, but with more audio issues. Overall, hitting target frame rate and getting consistent audio was not happening at all during the external world areas. Performance in battle was much better though, so if like Moon, you don't mind muting the game and spending most of your time in battles, it's technically playable. However, there were still audio struggles in battles, which keeps me from recommending this title. Overall, I give this title a 6 out of 10 for playability and a 5 out of 10 for audio. Only play if you're absolutely desperate for this game, which is probably the weakest Pokemon game on the 3DS anyhow.